Hello everyone, my name is Pierre Corbin. I'm the creator of the Great Reset films. This is the first of a series of videos that I plan on doing that I want to entitle The Great Reset News, where basically I look at the news that are happening in a given week or bi-weekly, and I just present them to you from the perspective of, the Great Reset, the level of our economy, and Bitcoin in general. This is the point of it, is to put it all around the topic of Bitcoin. So I've just gathered a bunch of news throughout the week that I think were the most relevant for our topics, and we're just going to look at them together and comment them. So here we go. First one, widespread use of Nigeria's e-Naira could be problematic according to the IMF. This came out on May 4th, which is a bit of an interesting story, right? Because the IMF are themselves pushing for people to create CBDCs. Now, if you don't know about it, the e-Naira is Nigeria's CBDC. It's been released, I think, mid last year, fourth quarter of last year, and it hasn't been going too well. There's been a lot of videos about that, the adoption, how people are accepting it. I mean, there's literally the houses of central bankers that have been raided, so it's not good acceptance. In fact, for the new project that I'm working on, the Fight for the US Dollar, this new documentary project, Nigeria is one of these cases that we're looking at because it's a good example of how CBDCs can't work because they're all about control. Nigeria has been rolling this out little by little. They started by limiting, the amount that you could withdraw from ATMs. Then they completely forbid people from taking money from ATMs, and then they only rolled out their CBDC. They took a bit of a step back because of how it was being pushed back by their society, but it's not finished. It's not finished. They still plan on doing a full release by the end of this year, 2023. But this piece is interesting because, you see, the IMF is saying that it could be problematic according to the IMF. Now, why is that? I have troubles understanding it, even though this is really what I focus my research on nowadays. The IMF, they're pushing for the adoption of CBDCs. Why would they block this here? I think there could be one explanation, is the fact that the IMF would rather be involved in any release of CBDCs. The IMF, they had this role in our world where they are they bail out countries, and in exchange, they push monetary policy, economic policy. They've been doing this since their inception, in fact. So it's interesting to see this here, right? They have a certain play. They'd rather not have Nigeria do their own thing. They'd rather Nigeria do a CBDC, but following the rules and recommendations of the IMF. That's what I think is at play here. Right now, you see, they're pointing the finger. They're saying, yeah, CBDCs are great, but what they're doing, not necessarily. We think there's a risk. And this is just, it shapes public opinions about what Nigeria is doing. And the IMF saying something like that is important to a country like Nigeria, because this is what allows them to more easily get financing. As long as they listen to the IMF, it's easier for them to gather some financing. So you see, it's Christian Georgieva, the managing director of the IMF, has issued a warning regarding the unanticipated consequences that the retail Nigeria CBDC may have, right? Which is interesting. Now, next piece of news. We're not going to let them impose social credit score on Floridians. So we have it here. It's Ron DeSantis, and he's explaining that he's against the use of CBDCs, which I completely back him on that point. Regardless of the opinions you can have on Ron DeSantis, I don't know. I'm not from the US. I don't necessarily care. But there's one point where he's right, is that the implementation of CBDCs will lead to social credit scores. And I think it's great that you have a governor that can say this like that in the US, because that's one of the important points of the US and the way it works, is that it's a federal system. Each state can kind of do what they want to a certain point, obviously, but it's important for a state like Florida, especially there's one that has been, after the pandemic, so many people have been starting moving to Florida. It's important for them to be so open about that and say clearly, that's not something we want. Next, we've got Binance. So there has been a congestion on the Bitcoin network this week because of ordinals. Now, if you haven't heard about ordinals, it's basically the equivalent of NFTs, but on Bitcoin. And it's just an extra field that you can fill in when doing a transaction, and you can fill it with information. And this information, theoretically, could take up the entire space of a block, right? And that's what some people have been doing this week. They were just, trying, I suppose, pushing the limits of the Bitcoin network by creating a lot of these tiny transactions with a lot of information that were eating up all of the block space. And because of that, a lot of the exchanges and everyone, in fact, couldn't really make transactions and withdraw their Bitcoin in the case of, Binance here, because there was too much congestion. Now, the Lightning Network is a solution to that, right? Because the fees can be high on the main network. On the Lightning Network, they will always be low, and the transactions will also happen instantly. So this is a pretty big deal. Binance saying that in order to prevent a similar recurrence in the future, what they want to do is, so they will continue to monitor on-chain activity and adjust accordingly if needed. Our team has also been working on enabling BTC Lightning Network withdrawals, which will help in such situations. Now, to be honest, I've played around with that, and it's fairly easy to integrate the Lightning Network. I mean, creating invoices dynamically, all of this, like there's a lot of libraries out there that allow you to do it fairly easily. I think it's a great move that Binance would do that, because it would allow to increase the use of the Lightning Network. And if they, the biggest exchange, and every other exchange integrates directly, it will allow for people to have this first use experience of the Lightning Network. And when you've used the Lightning Network, I mean, it changes your view on payments. It is instant. You can do it for micro transactions, literally send 12 Satoshis over it for zero cost. It's mind-blowing. So it's really great to see that from Binance, and I hope that we're going to have more of that in the future. Then pretty big news, Liechtenstein Prime Minister says government to accept Bitcoin payments open to investing reserves in BTC. Now, of course, it's a prime minister that talks about that. It's just something he said during an interview. It's interesting, obviously, for them to say that, especially a country like Liechtenstein that is, of course, famous for, similar to Switzerland, how it can help nations with managing their finances, right? It's kind of what Liechtenstein does. So it's very good to see that. It would be great to see this small nation also adopt Bitcoin in a certain way. We'll see. Right now, the only thing they're talking about is that the government would accept Bitcoin payments. So what does it mean? I'm guessing it would mean you can pay your taxes in Bitcoin. And yeah, I think this is basically the number one point. And other than that, they would be interested in investing reserves in Bitcoin. I mean, look, we know that's what's going to happen. It's little by little, right? It's first it was just the small people that little by little start buying more and more. Then it's the banks getting into it. Then it's nation states. We had El Salvador already in 2021. And, there's more and there's more coming. That's just the next play in that direction. And the more countries like that are going to start adopting Bitcoin and investing reserves in an open way, actually talking about it, the more other nations are going to do the same. And the more all of this is going to accelerate. It's just the game theory. Then we have Secretary Janet Yellen. As every Treasury Secretary has known, the only option that leaves our economy in good shape is raising the debt ceiling. Congress must stand behind the basic principle that America pays its bills and that we're not a deadbeat country. I mean, look, I see the first comment. My God, this is rich. Bitcoin fixes so you can get a real job. And it's so funny. If you go down, look, everyone is against her, and there's so much Bitcoin mentioned. He's a Bitcoiner. I know him personally. It's like, who is he? Who is she even tweeting for? Like, I really have trouble understanding what these accounts kind of do and how many followers does she have? 350,000? I mean, but look, it's like, it's weird. I found it super weird, to be honest. It's the same thing always with these kind of profiles. The only option that leaves our economy in good shape is raising the debt ceiling. Look, I get it, Janet Yellen. You have no choice. They have to continue printing money. They have to put on more debt, and the more they increase the interest rates, the more this is true. And of course, the only thing you can do is increase the debt ceiling nonstop. It is such a boring game already. Some are calling for the end of a debt ceiling, and maybe that's what they should go for. I mean, if we're going for printing, we might as well embrace the thing. It's yeah, but that's the news from this week. They need to increase the debt ceiling again. So now we got the next headline: Goldman, Microsoft, CBOE, and others team up to launch a blockchain network. Now, we know that's going to happen. In fact, I talked about that in the Great Reset and the Rise of Bitcoin. This idea that, we have Bitcoin and the fact that anyone can be their own bank and like transact completely independently, and this works perfectly. And on the other side, we have governments that are creating their own CBDCs. These two dynamics that are going to be, organic adoption and forced adoption on people, it completely leaves out the middleman, which are banks. And these banks, they need to come up with some stuff, and that's the goal of this initiative. To be honest, it's not even the first one we've seen banks working on blockchain stuff. It's just to make them still look relevant, make them look hot, work on some new stuff. My opinion, my honest opinion, is that all of this, it's gonna fail eventually, and and we'll see how it goes, right? But it's just another one of these initiatives. You see who's involved in this? Microsoft, Deloitte, CBOE. Like, these guys, their goal is to make sure that the status quo stays where it is, that these companies still make. And like other firms participating include Digital Asset, BNP Paribas, Broadridge, Deutsche, Group, Cumberlord, Moody's, etc. Paxos is in the load there. I'm guessing in all of these guys there, it's just to make a buck out of this situation because they can. But for me, that call's desperate. Next up, we've got US that announces $1.2 billion in new military aid for Ukraine. Well, maybe, that's part of the reason why Secretary Janet Yellen, she needs to increase the debt ceiling. Or am I here? Look, that's, again, more help for this proxy war. We kind of know what it's about. And it's, I find it's a bit hard to see. At the same time, this same week, we have Zelensky saying that we are ready to fight Russia and do the next counterattack, but it's going to cost too many lives. We have to do it slowly. Like, this is both what Putin wants, this is what Biden wants. And what's happening in the end is that little by little, you just have a bunch of Ukrainians that are dying. I find it pretty sad. And the US is doing this from a distance, just sending money there, getting involved. And they have a lot of interest in Ukraine. Obviously, we know that. They have, different biolabs. They own, American companies own a lot of the agriculture there. So, I just find it a bit sad to see this going on, this whole proxy war happening. Then, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a sec, but Republicans have come together in a very boring presentation, might I add. They got to get their shit together. But this is Marty Bent, being Marty Bent the way he is, talking about these kind of things in the most direct ways. Biden is a treasonous puppet who has continually sold his influence to the highest bidder. Look, what they're talking about is the whole money laundering scheme that the Biden family has been doing since forever. A lot of it has come out, and we're going to look at it in detail in a sec. It's it's simply how they manage to get all of their money from different governments, different companies, into their own personal accounts. From what I've seen, and they have tens of thousands of transactions through all of these years from the Biden family that prove that just these financing that come from these government people directly. I think the ones that were mentioned really are from Romania and from China, and how all of this is organized. We'll talk about this in a second, but this was the first announcement where they mentioned that. And I mean, does it surprise anyone? No, it doesn't. But come on, like, what about these guys? What about these guys? It's, there's a lot of hypocrisy in all of this stuff as usual. Important piece, Great Reset. BRICS to launch common currency for international trade. Look at them, all happy. So the BRICS recently, we know that they've added Saudi Arabia. And I think that it kind of makes sense. Iran is also part of it, right? Yeah, there's a second I in BRICS. It's been happening for a while now. It makes sense, again, it's the classic excuse that Putin has been talking about to all of these people for so long, is that, especially since COVID, the whole inflationary situation in which the entire world finds itself is because of how the US manages the US dollar. I have to agree with him on that point, but it's just the way our system works. Their initiative is to try and do something else and break that system. So it makes sense for the BRICS to do that, I believe. But yeah, we'll see how all of this goes. Will it really change anything? Look, we live on a system that anyway uses the US dollar everywhere. The whole Western world uses the US dollar. So do all of these guys. I mean, China mostly uses the US dollar as well. It's just the way our system is built. It's interesting to see an alternative being built. The only thing that is not great in all of that is that, well, you have these two people, and we know what it looks like when China creates a new currency nowadays, like they did the digital yuan. This is the Orwellian scenario of, control of society, social credit system, cameras in the street that will monitor. I mean, literally, you can drive too fast, be flashed by a photo radar, and you can have money directly deducted from your account because the government holds that account, not a bank. I mean, that's horrible, and that's what I really don't like seeing inside of this picture, is that it's these people creating this currency. But maybe it can change some of the dynamics around the dollar. Interesting to see simply how it can rock the things a bit. But generally speaking, I think it's not the right way to get off the dollar. This is, if anything, just for third world countries, something they might, in the short term, go towards that will make them in a worse situation in the future before transitioning to Bitcoin. In fact, this is my general opinion about anything that concerns CBDCs or new currency initiatives like this, is that down the road, it's all going to fail and it's all going to lead everyone to Bitcoin. Then US bank failures each year. Look, this is fairly interesting. We see in 2007 global financial crisis, how many banks, so there was 25 banks in total, and how many of them failed after that, year and year and year. There's because of the way our system is built on debt and the how these interest rates are manipulated, it has to lead to the destruction of smaller banks for everything to be gathered only among a few banks. I think they know that that's part of the reason why they want to create CBDCs. It's because that's just the perfect opportunity for them to do it at that point. If there are almost no banks left and all of these small banks are managed by the bigger banks anyway, it's it's the perfect shitstorm for people to be able to push and governments to be able to push their control money. We see here in 2023 though, so much bigger already. We're exceeding the level of bank failures for 2007 when there was the global financial crisis. We're exceeding these values, and it's just the way it is. There's no recession. There's just fake messages sent around that in the media. Moving on, US interest payment is now equal to defense spending, and 30% of the debt that has to be refinanced in the next 12 months at today's higher rates. Hang on. So what does it mean? Look, we see it here. Federal government national defense consumption, sure, it's going up. Federal government current expenditure interest payments. So you see, they have increased the interest rates so much and so quickly, so drastically, that all of the debt that the US has to reimburse are now costing them pretty much the same amount as their defense budget. And look, I don't know, we can check US defense budget to GDP. They have the highest in the world, right? Let's see how much it is, in fact. Percent of GDP, let's open up right here, the World Bank. Military expenditure as percent of 3.5, exactly. And this is, again, the highest country in the world, and they're at this level of now spending for their interest payments. It's crazy, and it's unsustainable, because if they continue increasing rates, you see what's going to happen is that this value is going to continue going up, and the government, they're going to bankrupt themselves just because of how they're increasing their interest rates. We'll see how it goes. Look, we know the Fed, I mean, not a lot of people know that, but the Fed, they're independent, they're a private bank. They can continue doing whatever they want. They will only be influenced by the government. Is it their goal to bankrupt the government? I highly doubt it. I really, really doubt that, but it's the situation they're leading towards. So there's a moment, this has to come down. This has to come down, or they have to start inflating the value of this debt so much that this percentage naturally drops. So what this means, higher printing of money, higher creation of new money, therefore the value of this debt compared to the whole value of money available in the world is going to drop. That's the strategy that they're going to have to adopt, but right now with these interest rates, the opposite is happening. I think they're still trying to curb inflation until things look a bit better. Then we got US Congress says maybe we do print money out of thin air, but we're the US government. Yeah, look, again, of course, that's a Bitcoin page, so it's only Bitcoiners below that. It is how it is. They literally print money out of thin air, and they can do it because they're the US government. Every other currency is always going to inflate more and lose in value more faster than the US dollar. This is the position that the US is in, and this is what he's talking about here. And he's right in saying that. They can print it out of thin air, and they can do it only because they're the US government. But be careful there, Mr. US Congressman Sherman, because there's a limit to what things, how these things can work. And we can't be too naive, and we should learn from history that printing money out of thin air is not a sustainable solution, and there's moments where stuff breaks. Moving on, presented without comment. Let's check it out. Total net worth held by the top 10% since 1990 to today, and total net worth held by the bottom 50%. Look, it's normal. Since 2007, you see, this was the last drop that there was before the huge increase that we've had now. 2007, what happened, right? We're about here. So after that, the recovery, what have governments done and banks done? They've just lowered interest rates. They've made it so much easier for people to, for banks and for governments to print money. And this money, I mean, where does it go? We know that. Everyone knows that. It all goes into assets. So this will be, stocks, real estate, anything. It can be treasuries, etc. It doesn't go into people's salaries and into their pockets, right? I'll cover this perfectly in the Great Reset and the rise of Bitcoin. And we see it here. Look at this. Look how much richer they've gotten as opposed to the 50% of the population, right? The bottom 50%, they're the people that, they don't have the money to buy assets. There's a high chance they don't even have money to own a house, right? And even if they do, it's through credit and they're not the ones really owning it up until it's completely paid for. So anyone who has any kind of assets and thinks that they've made a killing because they're so smart, like real estate and so on, is an illusion. Look at this. Look at this. This is money printing. That's all it is. Moving on, breaking. Pacwest bank shares plunged 20% as customers took out 9.5% of the bank's total deposits last week. It's not over. No, it's not. But this week, at least, no bank has failed. It's at least a good thing. We have, sure, a huge drop, 20%. Now, that was on the 11th of May. I mean, I get it. It's bad news. It's, again, another bank that is failing. And they're just stuck in this high interest rate environment where they have the same situation. Where were we? Not here. I can't find it. The same situation where the government has to pay. Yeah, well, actually, that was it. The same situation where U.S. government has to pay huge interest rates. The banks are in the same situation, and because of that, they're running out of cash. And this is exactly what is happening to Pacwest. This is what happened to the other ones too. They don't have enough money to pay their debt, their short-term debt, and it just puts them in a huge stress. So everyone, remember, take your money into Bitcoin, take it out of exchanges. No bank is safe at that point except for the bigger banks. So be careful out there. Here we go, the Biden money laundering operation explanation. Let's open it up. We're only going to look at the simple elements. So there's first Romanian payments. This is as far as this article has gone through. There's, again, tens of thousands of transactions that were gathered as part of the subpoena. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. So Romanian payments we have here. You see, the Vice President Biden met with the Romanian president at the White House concerning anti-corruption efforts. Of course. VP Biden voices approval over Romania's progress with the fight against corruption. Soon thereafter, on November 5th, so that's literally, less than 2 months later, the business of a corrupt Romanian businessman, Gabriel Popoviciu, deposited nearly $180,000 into the account of Robinson Walker LLC, a corporation formed by Biden family associate John Robinson Walker. Days later, Walker deposited $59,000 to his personal account, and then wired that from his personal account to Hunter Biden. And there you have it. This tells it all. There's more. There's more of them, you see. From 2015 to 2017, total nearly $3 million into the Biden family private accounts. Wow. And same thing for China. This one is almost even worse, right? Because China, they've only been increasing their influence around the world. And we have it here. Step 1, CFC infrastructure creates infrastructure with Hudson West. Okay. Step 2, removes as the main member and adds another group. Step 3, Russian group said CFC infrastructure 10 million, and they make a direct payment of 100K to Owasco PC, right? All of this is explained here. I'm going to put all of the references in the video details. But yeah, look, one of these. Owasco PC received $100,000 through a Chinese corporation funded by corrupt Chinese billionaire. Hunter Biden and his associates would attempt to hide the foreign source of the money by layering LLCs formed in Delaware. Here's how it worked. And there's the whole thing here explained. You can just say, yeah, China payments to Biden. Everything is described in here. This is the original video. These are the guys that have been explaining that in that press conference. And they have an entire memo that you can find it in this article too. It's crazy, but as I said earlier, not surprising. Here we go. Next up, after spending $470 million last week to defend the peso, Argentina is completely out of liquid international reserves. Despite facing 104% inflation, the only option left for the government seems to be further devaluation of their currency. Argentina are in a very tough situation. They're running out of money. They're running out of sources to get dollars to pay back these debts they even blocked for a certain time. I'm not even sure what the situation is now. That was 2 weeks ago. They blocked citizens' dollar bank accounts for a period of a few days in order to be able to repay all of that. So yeah, they're just out of liquidity, completely out of it. And either they're going to default, and what does this look, I mean, it would be horrible for a country like Argentina that already has 104% inflation. I mean, these people can't think day to day, year to year. They're just in this pure short-term thinking. The only ones that aren't are the rich people and then, the people that are creating that situation there. So the only thing they can do is just print more of their money, devalue it some more, because with this new printed money, they can buy more dollars in order to pay this debt. And what's going to happen, the IMF is again going to give them another loan that is going to again require them to pay more interest payments, and this cycle just keeps on going. It's all financed by the US system, by the IMF, and that's how it's supposed to be for things to work. Crazy if you ask me. Just in UK GDP fell minus 0.3% in March. Don't say the R word. So what's the R word? I think you guessed it. It's recession. And this is, what do you have? Radio immunosab. Yeah, I mean, look, this is the situation that we're in. It's a whole society that is blindfolded. We refuse to accept the fact that there is some recession. Things have to go around, but central banks are like constantly, making it harder to get credit, which our system is completely dependent on and addicted to. And so the UK GDP fell minus 0.3% in March. Look, of course, in order for there to be a recession, it has to be over multiple months. It's likely coming at anyone, and everyone is just, I mean, every company is firing people. There's hiring freezes everywhere. There's no way to create new productivity in the way our system works today. The only thing that can save us is increased productivity through the use of AI and other. But even then, it is just an illusion, because the only thing that matters is to make sure this number looks good, which is the GDP number, and growth. That's the only concept, which is a failed concept from the start, because we live in an inflationary world. So it's all upside down. If you were to compare this to the new inflation that happened in March, this number would be even lower. Like it's all just manipulating the media, and we're all just looking at this like little sheep, and we don't want to call this a recession. It's illusions. And finally, for the last note, I think everyone has been, especially on Twitter, obviously, if you're on Twitter, Linda Yasarino leaves NBC Universal amid talks to become Twitter CEO. That's a bit of a mixed feeling, especially in the Bitcoin community, obviously, because Linda Yasarino, she is, let's open her profile. I've been seeing a bunch of images on LinkedIn and such, if my internet chooses to cooperate in this case, where she is an active member of the World Economic Forum, among other things, obviously, right? But I don't think that she is here to follow the idea that Twitter should be a platform for free speech. I think, if anything, she is going to simply destroy the efforts that Elon Musk has been trying to push on Twitter, which I find is a shame, but is only a good reason to transfer to better networks such as Nostr, that are completely, open to free speech. And, we'll see. She's starting in 6 months. Elon Musk apparently chose her. She's starting in 6 weeks. Linda Yasarino, we'll see what she does. But I was bullish on Twitter. This news makes me less bullish. But let's give her, benefit of doubts. We know the opinions that Elon Musk has on free speech and other elements of our society and the media and so on. Maybe she changed, maybe that's she shares these positions now. I kind of doubt that, but we'll see. Anyway, that was it. That was this video for this week. This is the news. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you liked. I think it's pretty interesting. I try and add my own view on, wrap everything around Bitcoin, add my view on these events. Let me know what you think, and make sure to subscribe if it's the first time you're watching this. I recommend watching the film of the channel, The Great Reset and the Rise of Bitcoin. I'm also working on some more stuff. I'm very excited to be able to share that with everyone here. And yeah, check us out. Check us out on Twitter. Check all the links in the description. I'll talk to you real soon.